Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. You know, last segment I asked you to start thinking about what draws people to you and what kind of characteristics do other people have that you get drawn to them. Now, there's no law that says you have to like everybody. You know, we try to like everybody, and usually there are characteristics that people have that we like them at least to some degree, but you don't really have to like everybody like they're your best friend or anything like that. But one thing you have to do is to respect people enough so you allow them to be a human being. You allow them to be who they are, and they need to respect you enough that they allow you to be who you are. And somewhere in the mix we can all get along. At least that's the hope. Now, I want to mention the fact that some people try to manipulate other people and control them in that way. So what are the characteristics of a good relationship? That's basically what I want to get to today. But I want to tell you first about how people can manipulate others in order to control them. So you might want to ask the question, why would anyone want to control somebody else? Well, part of it is the fact that they're insecure. And because they're insecure, they want to have an outcome to a situation the way that they want it. And the idea, if they're insecure and they're not sure about themselves and they're not sure about what their personhood is like, and I'm going to use the term personhood because it's the characteristics of who you are. It's the kind of person that you are. And if you don't feel comfortable in your own skin, you may feel more comfortable in your own skin if you have more control of other people, because you feel more secure being involved in a power relationship with somebody. A lot of the things that happen, they're not because we love each other, it's because somebody's trying to get power over somebody else. And a lot of abuse is really defined by being a power relationship. So somebody abuses somebody else. Is it because they love them? They say, oh, I'm loving you and that's why I'm doing this to you? No, that's a lot of crock. That doesn't happen. But it's I'm trying to get power over you, because if I get power over you, then I feel more secure, because then you have to look up to me and I'm afraid of losing you. But if you have to look up to me because I'm in control, then I feel more secure. You don't, but I do. Relationships get very complicated, but I do want to start off by discussing the fact that manipulation of other people gives some people a sense of power and control, and you do not want to be in a relationship where you're controlled. The reason, you are an individual in your own right. Nobody owns you. By the same token, you don't own anybody else. And so we need to be free to allow a person to be who they are. That doesn't mean we have to get involved in it. We may decide not to get involved with it, or we may agree with them and we may want to be involved in it, and that's a whole nother issue. But we have to allow people to be who they are and not control them and not try to make them like us. If I were to marry somebody, and that's not going to ever happen, but if I were to marry somebody, it would be a mistake for me to try to make them like me. Or if somebody wanted to marry me and I agreed to get married, it would be a mistake on their part to make me into them. We need to cherish individuality, and in a good marriage, the two people, the Bible says that when you get married, the two become one, and that's true, but you also remain two. Marriage is the only organization, or the only union, because I think union is a better word than organization, where you get together and the two become one, and yet they remain two. Well, how do they do it? Well, they do it by respecting each other. If somebody has a great interest in doing a certain thing, then let them do it and support them in it. If you have a great time in being a certain person or doing a certain thing, then they should support you in it. And you can be very, very close to a person who doesn't have your same ideas and doesn't have your same personality and doesn't have your same talents or interests. You can still be very close to them. You just have to respect them enough to allow them to be them. And they have to respect you enough to allow you to be you. Well, back to the manipulation. There are a lot of people who try to manipulate others by making them feel guilty. So I just want to give you some examples of this. when I was in the 5th grade, this is going back quite a ways, but I was about 10 or 11 years old. I was in the 5th grade. We had a teacher who used to get very, very angry. And when she'd get angry, her face would be red, beet red. You could see the change of color on her skin. And then she'd start screaming and screaming and screaming. And it's like she couldn't let it go. And then she would slam the door. She would either walk out and come back, and she would slam the door. And what usually happened was she slammed the door so hard that a piece of ceiling would fall off and land on the floor. Now, we were in the 5th grade. I remember the teacher. I remember her name. I remember what she looked like. I remember almost everything about her. But why do I remember her so well? It's because kids love to see her get mad. Because if they could make her mad, they could send her screaming, and of course, what's the value to them? Well, they don't have to do a lot of work if she's there having a meltdown. They just sit there and watch her have the meltdown, and what's more, they know they caused it because they know that they were able to manipulate her into it, and that gave them a sense of power. And don't think that kids don't realize this. They may not be able to describe it. Cognitively, they might not be able to tell you what's going on psychodynamically, but that's what they're doing, and they do have a sense of understanding of that. So what happened was I'd be sitting there, and I could see it coming. Somebody would say something that was going to make her mad, and I said to myself, I never did it myself, but I would say, here it comes. Sure enough, she'd get mad, she'd start to yell, and then she'd yell, and then her face would turn beet red, and then she would get shaking practically. She was so angry, and then she would walk out, or she would slam a door. A piece of ceiling fell from the ceiling. This is an old school. They would never let they would never let students be in that school today, at least not until they fixed the ceiling. So we had these chunks of ceiling on the floor. I thought it was kind of funny, and the kids thought it was kind of funny. I never did anything to cause it to be angry, but I knew that they would, and it made a very interesting 5th grade class. Now, if this person were to come to me, if this teacher were to come to me, supposing at the time I was an adult, and she came to me and said, I don't know what to do. My kids are making me so mad. They're really misbehaving. The first thing I would ask her is, what are you doing when they misbehave? How do you respond to that? Well, I get mad and I yell, and then I go out and I slam the door. Don't react that way. You may not be able to stop a person from trying to get you, to manipulate you, but you can change your response to the fact that it doesn't work for them anymore. Kids do that with their parents. They'll act in a certain way because they know how their parents will respond, and then they can get what they want out of it. One thing you have to remember about psychology, if a person acts a certain way and they continue to act that way, and they do it over and over again, they are getting something out of it, or they wouldn't continue. So the best time to talk to this teacher would be, okay, the next time they make you mad, just kind of brush it off like it's not important. I'm not going to get mad today, and I know that's the way you feel, but we're just not going to even discuss it. Then go on and teach. What are they going to do? You know, basically you have cut their power. If someone's trying to manipulate you, usually they do it by trying to make you feel guilty or by trying to make you angry. With this teacher, it was the anger. And so what you have to do is just match them. No, don't get angry back. Just a few soft words, like the Bible says, can quell a lot of wrath. Just a few soft words. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Let's go on and we'll discuss it later. They've lost because they couldn't make you angry. You know, when I was an adult and I worked at a university, for part of my years, I was on the staff of the telephone company of that university. The university was large enough, it was like a small city, and they had their own phone system and they had their own phone company, and kids could rent phones from them, or they could have their own phones and tap into our system. But at any rate, we were our own phone company, and there was a lady there. who was a very nice lady, but she was very nervous. She was very high strung. And there was a guy there who worked with us, and I liked him. He had a tremendous sense of humor. But he would try to get people angry to see them react. And he tried it on me, and it didn't work. His idea was, I like cats. I had cats because I love dogs too. And he would try to get me upset by saying, Pat, don't you think that dogs make a better pet than a cat does? And he was expecting me to fly all over the place and say, are you kidding? Cats are this, 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 this. And he expected a big argument. But I knew what he was after, and I just wouldn't let him get away with it. So his name was Bob. He was a great guy. I liked him. And he said, Pat, don't you think that dogs are much better pets? They're more personable, so they're much better pets than cats are. And I pretended to think about it for a minute, and I says, Bob, you may be right about that. I never thought about it before, but I think you're right. They are more personable. In other words, I agreed with him. How can you argue with a person that agrees with you? And he tried various things. And I just didn't give. I knew what he was doing, and I just matched him. And so he says, I can't make you mad at anything, can I? I failed. Well, there was the lady, back to the lady that was working with us, who was high-strung. She got into an accident, but she was okay. It wasn't too terribly bad an accident. And she had a car. They had to repaint part of her car, redo part of her car, and repaint it the same color as it was before. So Bob says to me one day, just follow my lead, Pat. I'm going to try something. I knew he was up to a joke somehow, so I'm there, and I said I would. And so he said, and her name, we'll call her Joan. That wasn't a real name. He said, Joan, they did such a good job in your car. I'm amazed at the paint job. The colors almost match. Notice he said almost match. And then he looked over to me, and I says, yeah, you can hardly tell the difference. The colors are really close. Well, she had a meltdown. She was all over the place. She was going to call the company. Why didn't you match the colors right? She was going to call the company that made the paint. What color paint was it? She was going to call the garage that did the paint job. She was all over the place in her anger, and was sitting there giggling and giggling and giggling. Finally, she got over it, and she went out to check her car to see if it was the same color. She couldn't see any difference in it, but she thought we could. And so here's a case where we kind of manipulated her, and I feel kind of bad about it that I took part in it, but she was just so high-strung. It didn't take anything to get her angry. And so this is one area of manipulations. Parents do it to their children. Children do it to their parents. People do it to each other. What if we didn't try to make people feel guilty? What if we didn't try to get control over them? Now, it's a little difference when you have a parent and a child. The parent has to have control over the child because the child's not old enough to take care of themselves. But in terms of human relationships, what if we just decided that we were going to let each other be each other? We're going to help each other to grow and develop to the fullest extent that they can, and they're going to help us do the same way. So you have to really realize that your attitude toward people, in terms of manipulation, my idea is that you respect each person and you don't do anything to manipulate them. Remember, and here are some other things I want to talk to you about relationships. Remember that nobody owns you. And likewise, you do not own anybody else. And we shouldn't treat each other like we own each other. You belong to me, so you're going to do this. Or I belong to you, so I've got to do that. Guilt is a very, very powerful emotion, and it's also very, very difficult to deal with. And anybody will do anything they can to get rid of guilt, because if you're under a cloud of guilt, you feel crushed, you feel burdened. And so you want to stop that feeling. And so you end up by doing what other people want you to do so you don't feel guilty. Or with relationships between girls and guys. A guy said, if you love me, you would do what I want you to do. And the girl's saying, but I don't want to. He should be respectful of her and not try to force something she doesn't want to do. And she should be respectful of him, that she doesn't hate him, but she decides she's going to maintain her own personality and her own own values, and no one's going to force her into anything because you do not own anybody else and they do not own you. So if you're in a relationship, you need to focus on what will make the relationship work. We like to know, we like to be who we are. We need to let people be who they are. We need to respect each other's individuality. You can care for each other, you can love for each other, but you don't have to be like each other. You know, if you can't marry a person or have a relationship with somebody and make them into you. It doesn't work because they're not you. I talked last segment about the irrational core, the fact that we have something innate within us that's precious, that's important, that's God-given, and that's us, that makes us us. And we can't just say, well, you've got this trait and that trait and that trait, so this is what you like. It's only a part of what you like. There's a lot more to people than that. In a good marriage, the two become one, and yet they remain two. And I've said that before. Now, we have to be tolerant of differences. You're not going to marry a clone, and you are not going to be the clone of somebody else, and they are not going to be the clone of you. But you have similar interests, and you can, and that's important. Having similar interests is important in a relationship, but it's not the whole relationship. It's not, or if there are differences, you like one thing, he likes another. You can still have close relationships. I have close relationships with friends that do things that I wouldn't think of doing, and there's nothing wrong with those things. You know, relationships are complicated. To make them work is a lot of work. To make a marriage work is a lot of work. You have to do one thing you have to do is don't give anybody double messages. Parents do it to their kids. People do it to each other. A double message is when you say two things and they seem to be opposite of each other and they really can't be reconciled. And that causes a lot of emotional difficulty in people in relationships, and it causes a lot of emotional difficulty for children. For example, if I said, I like you very much, but boy, I can't stand you sometimes. Well, that's saying two opposite things. I like you. No, I don't. I can't stand you. And they put these statements right next to each other. I like you, but I don't. There are things that are wonderful about you, but it's not true. You know, and you've got to choose one or the other. You can't be two things. These statements cannot be reconciled. What I hate to see is when parents do it to their children, because the children who always accept guilt, even if it's not deserved, it's part of their psychodynamics that they do that. The family breaks up, it's my fault. I'm the kid. I should have been a better kid. And then the parent complicates this by saying, no, you're a wonderful kid, but sometimes you drive me crazy. You know, you don't say opposite things to a person and they can't reconcile it. They grow up with two visions of themselves. They grow up thinking, I'm really a good person, my parents love me. No, I'm not. They're mad at me all the time. They kept telling me that they love me, but they punished me all the time. And to a child, that cannot be reconcilable. The problem is it's not reconcilable to the adult either. Did my mother love me? Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes she acted like she hated me. How do you fit the two together? Well, the problem is you can't fit the two together. And when you try to do it, it doesn't make any sense. It leaves a lot of room just for confusion. The child is hurt by it. They grow up being emotionally damaged. And if the adults are having a relationship and they treat each other that way, they can't fix it. They just can't be together because they can't fix it. They can't reconcile it either. Do you love me? Yeah. Well, then why do you hit me? Why do you swear at me? How can you love me if you swear at me? Well, if you use bad language, how can you love me if you use bad language? Well, I love you, but. You know, I'd like to see sometimes but taken out of the English language. I love you, but. I can do this, but. You know, you can ask me, but. Always it's the opposite. I am fair to you, but sometimes I'm not. You know, I get emotionally abusive, but sometimes I'm okay. How do you judge the worth of a person and how the person reacts and how you can have a relationship with a person if you're always having double messages? And I'm here to say that it really does not work. And if you try to do it, you'll have a problem. Now, you have to remember also, and I guess I'll close on this, you can't change a person. They are who they are. Their basic characteristics are their basic characteristics. You can't always change them. People get married thinking that a person will change to accommodate them. Or they get married because they think the person will change to accommodate them, and it won't happen because a person's core is their core, and they are who they are. If you don't like a person, then you shouldn't marry them to begin with, just thinking and hoping things will change, because it probably won't. And you'll probably end up by not liking each other and separating after a period of time. Now, the problem with separations and the problem of working with people who are separating, you've got to remember we are an energy system, and I will close with this because we have almost no time left. We're kind of like an energy system. We have so much energy. And that energy can be spent in different ways. We can create, we can grow, we can do our careers, we can have a lot of fun with it. But if a problem comes up in a marriage or in a relationship, all of that energy goes toward trying to fix the relationship or maintain the relationship, and then the growth and the development and the creativity stop. They stop because you've only got so much energy. You don't have an endless amount of it, and when you use your energy just to fix things or maintain things, there's no energy left to grow, and you're so concerned about the relationship and the fact that it's not working that you don't have the mood, you don't have the interest in doing something new and creating and growing. You're always trying to fix things. Now, what I'm saying is true of adults, how they treat each other. It's true of how you treat children. They have an energy system too, and if they have to worry about the next time they're going to get slapped or the next time they're going to be reproved of something, what energy is there left for them to learn? Children in school have got to be at peace, or they can't learn. It interferes with that learning. So we have to maintain relationships in a way that's respectful enough that people will be able to grow and develop, and that we can live at peace. So I'm going to close it here, and we'll do something else next time. Please join me then.